if it's bull or bear, I don't care. It's quite a rough ride, just like life. But I'm kinda patient, cause only time will tell. It's gonna go up, so you better stay calm. Grow your coins, you gotta grow your coins. Grow your coins, grow your coins. Grow your coins, you gotta grow your coins. Grow your coins, grow your coins. Grow your coins, you gotta grow your coins. Grow your coins, grow your coins, you gotta grow your coins.
What's up, everybody? I am the Crypto Crow. It's about 2:45 Eastern Standard Time, and I've been watching. I was actually watching Crypto Bobby's channel, and I've been watching this hearing. And I thought about doing something similar, but it seems like a lot of other people are doing it. They're basically streaming this hearing with LBRY coin representatives. And watching this hearing is beyond frustrating. And watching this hearing, to me, is like watching... It's like watching senior citizens watching the Olympic races. It's I've never seen so many people so disconnected, and I've never seen so many people in charge of rules and laws that have no idea what they're even talking about, no idea what they're even doing. All they know is that they are threatened by a new era of technology they are not prepared to monitor, control, protect, secure, or even regulate, for that matter. And it's all the more reason for me that Bitcoin, something that I'm a little worked up. I feel like I've got some stirred up. I've been reading some stuff, and I don't really know. I don't know what to say other than, for me, watching this all go down. Now, here's the thing, and I just saw a comment, and I think you're right. I think you're right to a lot of extent. I mean, LBRY coin itself is basically, you could almost call it a cartel-like structure. You could almost call it a cartel without the monopoly yet, right? I mean, they're trying to monopolize, fiat-backed cryptocurrency on a global scale using a lot of different companies. I mean, to me, that's ultimately a cartel. And I think that in one way, shape, or form, the government is going to figure out a way to bend LBRY to their, I don't know what the, requirements, best interests, that sort of thing. And so, which is fine, which is actually fine to me. Because overall, the way I see this is not a war of the government versus crypto. Well, in a sense it is, but let me bring this back. There's a lot of stuff that I'm going to go over in this video, so this is not going to be a 20-minute video. This is the way I look at it. We have Bitcoin. There's nothing anybody can do about it. And the only way that the government can truly regulate Bitcoin is while its value is so volatile and so speculative at this very entry-level position that it's currently still in, and people are converting it back to fiat. That's the only way it can be regulated. because the regulations are not on Bitcoin itself, but in the exchange of Bitcoin for fiat currency or other currencies for that matter. And so that's how regulators, that's how the government, that's how this stuff is monitored. That's how they know who owns what. That's how, it's when you put your crypto on an exchange, that's how the government knows. And Crow's Nest X will be no exception. You have to play by government rules. There's no ifs, ands, or ways about it. That's how it is. And that's okay. However, the day that everybody in cryptocurrency is talking about, this true revolution of technology, this true disruption of the current banking cartels, the current banking infrastructure, the day that we're all hoping for, the day that we're all planning for, is the day when Bitcoin itself can be utilized in ways that do not require you to convert it back into what will ultimately become an absolutely useless, valueless fiat currency. And so I've done a lot of calculations and I've been working on some different things, but I think in order to really understand what this feeling that I have over me reading what I've been reading is so I'm going to read something and I'm going to try and read it clear-headed. Okay? This is The Truth About the Federal Reserve by Stephen Thomas Kirshner. This was written on August 26th of 2016. And I'm not going to read the entire thing. I'm going to read parts that I've highlighted that I felt are relevant. And this is just to get bullet points. Now, I'm going to link this whole thing because I think this guy deserves some credit for this writing. And I'm going to link it again in chat for everybody. This is ultimately the Federal Reserve is ultimately like the first big financial cartel. And there are a lot of misconceptions about the Federal Reserve and what they do, what they've done, and why our current financial system is the way it is. And I believe that the Federal Reserve holds a great and significant deal of power that they should not have. And that is the power that we're fighting. It's not even necessarily the government as a whole. It's the people in charge or have been put in place to make decisions, ultimately, my opinion, on behalf of groups like the Federal Reserve and like these international global banking cartels, which they're all connected. They're all basically a part of the same group. The bank expanded its money supply rapidly, producing millions of dollars. This led to a 72% rise in prices across the board from 1791 to 1796. That is the true definition of inflation. Today we are told that an inflation is a rise in prices. However, the rising prices are a consequence of the expansion of the money supply. Real wealth means goods and services. Printing more money just causes the money to lose its value, which is very damaging, especially to the poor. And basically what they're saying is every time they print more money in abundance, it devalues what already exists. So overall, as all these rich white bastards are out there trying to pay for every war they can conjure up for their cults, we're paying for those wars by conjuring up more money out of thin air that then devalues the currency that everybody else is using. So the poor are getting poorer just by holding on to whatever little bit of cash they have because they don't have money to just throw around, make investments, or do other things with it. They can't turn their money into something that earns them more money because they, A, can't afford it typically, and just the very nature of holding their money makes them more poor. And that's the way this system is built. I'm going to be reading a quote later that I couldn't even get through it the first time I read it. I was getting so frustrated. Since the time the country was founded, banks held paper money, but they were required to hold both silver and gold. Many people, including myself, have misunderstood this. It's not that the metals back the money. It's that the money is a measurement of the amount of precious metal. For example, $20.67 was made the equivalent of 1 ounce of gold. These precious metals were chosen because they have universal value, and it showed that the U.S. currency was indeed a legitimate currency on the world market. It also prevented the banks from inflating their supply of paper money too much, since they would need a corresponding amount of specie. I guess it's called specie. I've never heard this term before. This helped stabilize prices and restrained what the government could spend. The founders learned the mistake of pure fiat money, that is, money issued on a whim with no corresponding specie, which is basically what we have right now thanks to Nixon. During the Revolutionary War, money was printed at will to pay for the war, and it was absolutely worthless by the end. Now, this quote, I almost want to I just want to plaster this everywhere. Congress voted, of course my wife's constantly blowing me up when I'm doing other stuff. Congress voted to reinstate the bank. Jackson vetoed it, including this message, which is one of my favorite quotes of all time. It is to be regretted that the rich and powerful too often bend the acts of government to their selfish purposes. Distinctions in society will always exist under every just government. Equality of talents, of education, or of wealth cannot be produced by human institutions. In the full enjoyment of the gifts of heaven and the fruits of superior industry, economy, and virtue, every man is equally entitled to protection by law. But when the laws undertake to add to these natural and just advantages, artificial distinctions, to grant titles, gratuities, and exclusive privileges, to make the rich richer and the potent more powerful, the humble members of society, the farmers, mechanics, and laborers, who have neither the time nor the means of securing like favors to themselves, have a right to complain of the injustice of their government. There are no necessary evils in government. Its evils exist only in its abuses. If it would confine itself to equal protection and, as heaven does its rains, shower its favors alike on the high and the low, the rich and the poor, it would be an unqualified blessing. Unfortunately, human beings are fallible. Human beings can get caught up in greed. Human beings can implement infrastructures to enable the rich to get richer off the backs of the poor. And they can do that through banking systems. They can do that through regulation. They can do that through laws. What they can't do that through is Bitcoin. And that is one of the sole reasons why Bitcoin has grown in popularity, because it retains itself. It maintains itself. It's a revolution against this kind of control and manipulation. It is a disruption of a system that empowers the wealthy and takes apart the poor. So where did the Federal Reserve come from? What started this whole thing? In 1910, a secret meeting was called on Jekyll Island off the coast of Georgia. The participants traveled in secret and used code names. Among them were Rockefeller's man in the Senate, a J.P. Morgan senior partner, and a representative of the Rothschild family. The men here represented around 25% of the world's wealth at the time. Depending on which version of history you listen to, here's how the story goes. And I used to dive really deep into a lot of this stuff. This doesn't even go into half of the detail, but it's kind of cliff notes. So the standard court historian would refer to the situation as the banking system was inherently unstable, and there was need for a powerful, centralized control. The Federal Reserve was established in order to maintain the value of the currency and balance out the business cycle. This would prevent depressions. The belief was that with the Fed being able to inject liquidity, cash by way of increasing the money supply, this would smooth things out and prevent downturns. This is the story that we're supposed to believe. The version that I find far more compelling: Wall Street was weakening due to private banks in the Western U.S. competing with them. They wanted to find a way to establish a cartel-style control over the financial system, so they founded the Federal Reserve under the guise as described above. For those of you that didn't know, the way a cartel works is very similar to a monopoly. The only difference is that instead of one business dominating a field, in this case, several businesses work together to do it. Libra? They called it federal in order to mislead the public about who actually controlled it. Woodrow Wilson agreed to sign the Federal Reserve Act into the law before even becoming president. The act was signed in the year 1913. This was accompanied by the income tax, which is enshrined in the 16th Amendment and never actually ratified, remember. The Fed has failed in what it was intended to do. Go figure. Before it was established, the American dollar rose 8% in value relative to the world's currencies. Since 1913, the American dollar has lost 95% of its purchasing power. Factoring that with the fact that wages for the average person haven't risen in the last 30 years or so really makes it clear why the poor are struggling. This started with President Franklin Delano Roosevelt's decision to reduce the pegging of gold from $20.67 an ounce to $35 an ounce in 1933. It was finished with President Richard Nixon's decision to sever the dollar from gold altogether in 1971 and leave use with the pure fiat currency that we have today. Inflation has been called a hidden tax because it destroys the value of savings. If you have, say, $500 in the bank, but the government is expanding the money supply at 10% a year, that money you have in the bank is losing 10% of its value each and every year. If you spend that money 3 years later, it will buy you 30% less than it did when you put it away. This is one of the other key reasons why Bitcoin is getting so popular. And this is also one of the reasons why so many people are hedging their assets in Bitcoin, because Bitcoin is most likely to go up because of its limited supply. There is no adding additional Bitcoin to the supply. What exists, that's it. There's no changing it. Fiat currency is the complete and polar opposite of that. Another effect of inflation is that it hurts businesses and their forecasts. If the price of everything were to rise by, say, 10%, that completely throws off their costing. That means that they will have to raise prices and or cut back on quantity of goods to make ends meet. Higher prices will lose customers, and that will be harder to give raises to employees in the future. Our record stock market highs right now are not caused by a healthy economy, but the fact that much of the loaned money goes into stocks which drive up artificially their value. This is known as asset inflation. No wealth is being created here. The numbers are just being unnaturally propped up by the money printing. The financial sector of our economy has done exceptionally well under our current system, but Main Street is being bled dry. Former chairman Ben Bernanke expanded the Fed's balance sheet from $500 billion to over $3 trillion. Whenever you see quantitative easing in the news, that's what this is. Inflation, just with a nicer name. We're getting to the end of this. Personally, it drives me nuts whenever I hear things like our current economy is proof that capitalism doesn't work. Or the problem is that we don't have enough regulation. Or the problems of today are due to greed. I can refute any of these points easily. First off, we haven't had anything close to capitalism in well over 100 years. In fact, some would say that we never really had it, because the government's intervened via protective tariffs, has imposed regulations that are the biggest burden to small businesses, redistributed wealth, and imposed farm subsidies, oil subsidies, etc. Capitalism means private profits and private losses, not private profits and socialized losses. Our economy is the most regulated it ever has been. George W. Bush, a so-called conservative, added 90,000 regulators to the government workforce, expanded government more than his three predecessors combined, and added about 10,000 pages of regulations. And that's just during his time in office. For Obama, it's been even more. I know that the Dodd-Frank Wall Street regulation has 2,000 pages on its own. And of course, that's not even touching on Obamacare. And that's it. I linked that article in the chat. Check that out. You know, I mean, overall, there are so many more reasons that Bitcoin is destined for a thriving future. There are still deniers. There are still doubters. There are still people out there who just simply don't understand it because they consider it a technical puzzle that they'll never solve. And it's not that complicated. In the grand scheme of things, Bitcoin's really not that complicated. The technology behind it and its purpose is absolute brilliance, but that doesn't mean you need to be brilliant to understand it. Right now, the current, this is probably even higher. It's probably higher now. But at one recent point, the global money supply was $90 trillion. Okay? Now, the idea of this calculation is to basically try to figure out what it would take for the global financial fiat currency system to be replaced by Bitcoin. Now, here's the thing. While Bitcoin itself is the grand poobah of cryptocurrency, the grandfather, the seed that planted the orchard, if you will, whatever you want to call it, I believe in Bitcoin as the primary store of value. I also believe that altcoins are going to be the little army that does the work. And I believe that ultimately altcoins and their smart contract usage are going to be or smart contract implementations, preferably Cardano. Things like projects like Turnio, GoChain, Cardano, Stellar Lumens, even Ripple to some degree. Even though Ripple's not even a necessity for their system, it's obviously still widely used and growing. But these altcoins are going to be what people utilize to get in and out of their primary store of value, which will ultimately become Bitcoin, not fiat currency. But because there's still such a wide dependency on fiat currency, you can't pay your mortgage note with Bitcoin. You can't pay your water bill using fiat or using Bitcoin. You can't pay for a lot of things. But what you will be able to use cryptocurrency for, or how you'll be able to access cryptocurrency, are some of these debit cards that are coming out that are going to enable people to spend cryptocurrency, convert it into fiat, and then pay for whatever they want, bills or what have you. And that is a technology, that is a subset of the grander picture that I think is going to help facilitate the overall growth and mass adoption for these things. But I think we're going to even need to take things one step further than that in the coming, decade or 5 to 10 years. And over the process of time, we're going to have a more of a flow of fiat currency basically being traded out and hedged against fiat currency's devaluation. And I think that a lot of that's going to go into crypto. There are only 21 million Bitcoin that will ever exist. There might even only be, who knows, 18 million that haven't been lost due to the loss of private keys or hardware or whatever the case may be. And at the time I calculated this up, what's up, Dick Insider? At the time that I calculated this up, which was basically, an hour ago, Bitcoin's value is $9,728. Keep in mind, this is up from a $3,100 low in December. So we're already basically 3x over the low of December. And I think that all this speculative ebb and flow of Bitcoin's price is going to continue until we get to the point where it is widely used. When the transactional volume has, 50 to 100x over where it currently is, and it's more widely understood as a technology and as a store of value for the common man and woman in the world, that is when we're going to reach a point where the volatility is going to start to dwindle more, and its stability is going to maintain itself with steady or deflationary growth over time until the entire 21 million has been mined up. That is the point where I think we really need to get to. And I'm going to explain some of the things that I feel we're going to have to do as a society, as a community, to facilitate that and see that happening. But overall, this is the deal. The current market cap is $173 billion. If you divide that by 50 million, that's $3.4 billion in actual money that has gone into the purchase of Bitcoin through exchanges, not necessarily counting over-the-counter trades. So there could be more than that, but because of the nature of over-the-counter trading, that's done so that people don't suffer slippage and basically increase the price on themselves as they're buying up the available volume or the available liquidity on one exchange or multiple exchanges, okay? You take the $90 trillion total global money supply, divide that by 50 million, you've got $1.8 trillion. It would take $1.8 trillion to go into Bitcoin through exchanges to bring the price up, okay, to basically 90 trillion, $1.8 trillion. That's what it would take to get Bitcoin's current market cap to match the global dollar supply. Now, keep in mind, I'm not a mathematician and I'm not even a math wizard. I kind of did this all, tried to keep it all clear. Any corrections in this, let me know in the comments if I made a mistake anywhere, because it's absolutely possible. My brain gets fried, and when it comes to numbers, I'm not always accurate. But $1.8 trillion would basically take us to a market cap of where we need to be. Now, that market cap would be 519x over where we currently are. 519x. You take that market cap, you multiply the current price of Bitcoin at 9,728 by 519, you've got a $5 million Bitcoin. So that's what we could see someday in the future. So when I look at these numbers, I think to myself, $1 million Bitcoin doesn't even sound unreasonable. It doesn't even sound improbable in the future, because I can tell you now, the market cap is going to continue to rise. The more mass adoption, think about it. We have spent a year and a half now in a bear market. We may very likely be turning around from that bear market. And if we do, and keep in mind, $5 million Bitcoin, it's never going to happen. That's basically taking all of the global, basically the $90 trillion worth of global assets and putting it, and basically trying to recreate that through the use of Bitcoin. It would take $1.8 trillion to go directly into Bitcoin itself through exchanges. So the likelihood of that happening, $1.8 trillion really isn't that much either. Keep in mind, I did a video a long time ago where I had talked about $280,000 Bitcoin and what would happen if just 5% of the global pension funds were to go directly into Bitcoin. That actually created like a $1.3 million Bitcoin all on its own. So, well, I named the video $280,000 Bitcoin because 1.8 million sounded stupid, but it's really not. There could very easily, I believe that there will be some day when Bitcoin is worth $1 million. But it's not going to be a day where, by that point, we're no longer going to be utilizing fiat currency for much of anything. It's already worth near nothing. So regulation only stops Bitcoin when converting it to fiat. Now, How do we improve the ability for the public to get more involved in cryptocurrencies and mass adoption? Well, one of those methods could quite possibly be something like Libra, when you've got 3 billion people looking to start utilizing cryptocurrency overall. I think that's possible. I think that's absolutely possible. And I think that this whole kind of charade, this whole back and forth with the government and the commissions and all that, they're basically just saying, look, we want a peace. That's all they're really saying in the grand scheme of things. We want a peace, and we want to make sure that we can help control it. That you do not run rampant with this new technology we know nothing about, we barely understand at all, and we want to make sure that we get our cut, and that we are the ones that are ultimately calling the shots and you are obeying your masters. That's it. And as long as Libra is willing to do that, well, then they'll probably end up getting some sort of support from the government, and it will become potentially, depending on how it's ultimately structured, it could become some sort of governmental cryptocurrency. You can't determine the value in a fiat that is on its way to hyperinflation. Well, that's very true. Very true. That's the whole point. That's the whole point. So my calculations are an exercise to show how possible that could be. And again, just like I just see in the comments from Hal, I will never trust Facebook and Libra, period. Absolutely. And the people in the know likely won't. However, think of all the media, all of the press, everything that's coming out about this Libra token, all of these commissions and regulators and all of these people launching all of these arguments and discussions with, Libra heads and so forth. It's all bringing up the topic of cryptocurrency. And so while, let's just say, millions and millions of people are exposed to this Libra token, but the overall, the underlining layer to all of this discussion is nobody trusts you, Facebook. Why should we trust you? Why should we allow you to create ultimately a global currency that you're calling a payment tool? But in reality, it's a global cryptocurrency backed by multiple fiat currencies. Why would we trust you with that kind of power when you just got done selling everybody's private information without their knowledge or permission for billions of dollars? Why should anybody trust you with that kind of power? And in that sense, I believe that the regulators have a right to be standoffish and a little snotty and all of that. Basically, like, who the fuck are you? Who are you to decide this for the public? And so while I agree with that, and I get that part of it, I still believe that the majority of it is a bit of a show. And I think what's going to happen is, as people learn more about the way Libra works, and they see the flaws in the way this works, they see that it's still a centralized platform. It still has issues. What resolves a lot of the issues that are going to be left behind by Libra? Bitcoin, Cardano, other projects that already exist that may not necessarily be backed by multiple fiat currencies or a cartel pushing them, or these projects don't necessarily have a built-in use case from the cartels that are coming together and paying their $10 million to get their cut of this whole thing and to adopt it and utilize it for whatever services they may offer instead of fiat currency. Look, we're going to see more of this in the future. At the very least, Facebook is paving the way. What's the thing? My lawyer always says this, something about pioneers are always shot in the back. And there's another part to that, but I don't remember what it is. We never really get to anywhere, but pioneers are shot in the back with arrows, something like that. And so, look, Libra's taking its shot in the back. But I think overall, the very idea is that the people, you guys, need to start taking things to the next step. What is the next step? The next step are these politicians. We absolutely need more crypto-friendly, open-minded politicians with an aptitude and a foresight to what's happening now and what's to come. We need to stop voting in these old, old school, old boys network fogies that don't know fuck all outside of what they've been touching for the last 20 to 30, 40 years of their already elongated careers. It's time to go out with the old, in with the new, and start changing the way the public sees this revolution of disruption, this transfer of wealth. It's time that we get people in office who are not going to go out on Twitter and try to take a shit on something they don't know fuck all about. It's time that we start putting people in positions of power that understand our mission and the direction we're trying to head. It's time that we take responsibility for the people that represent us in various forms of office. It's our responsibility to do that. And for the same way that we are all spending time researching cryptocurrencies, understanding blockchain technology, putting in our due diligence to better understand this space so that we make more educated decisions, the same amount of time needs to go in to researching who these people are running for the different positions in office that will ultimately control our lives and the directions that we all go. This whole video today is about trying to inspire you to get out there and start trying to find out who your local, regional, who your state, your Congress, all your representatives. Find out who actually has the aptitude for what's coming. Because I'll tell you right now, nothing inspires fear more than misunderstanding. People are afraid of what they don't know. And if we continue to put people into office that don't understand the space, we're going to continue basically eating our own shit because we're putting it out there to control our lives and to make decisions that mean a great deal for us. I don't believe there's any reason whatsoever why we have homeless. I don't believe there's any reason whatsoever why we have so many poor. I don't believe there's any reason whatsoever why states like California practically have a fucking internal city full of homeless people and disease and rats and all kinds of shit when you've got a bunch of fucking morons running around making millions of dollars for a goddamn movie nobody gives a shit about. Where's all this money going? The way our system is handled today is bullshit. It is a fraud. You want to talk about scams? You want to talk about all the money that's being used for terrorist activity and fraud and all this other bullshit? Well, how the fuck was all this happening before Bitcoin even got here? Why is all of a sudden cryptocurrency demonized as something that's facilitating all of this evil doing? It's all a crock of fucking shit because all these old people don't know what the hell to do with themselves. They don't know how to play a significant role in this other than to say it's a scam. It's being used for criminal activity. What hasn't been used for criminal activity since the dawn of fucking man?